All right, after that, what was probably a pretty pitiful demonstration of my ability to play George Lynch. Having said that, we would like to maybe just do just a kind of a brief overview, kind of a case study, if you will, I guess, of George Lynch, a fabulous guitar player. You know, I just can't think of a better era to be a guitar player than the 80s. I think a lot of the 80s metal guitar players, they raised the bar. And as a guitar player in the 80s, you know, it's one thing to be a singer. I mean, if you had to sing some Dio or something, I guess you obviously needed to, you know, have some power in your vocals. And bass, I think, was pretty straight up. Drummers were coming along, a lot of double bass stuff in the 80s. But I'm telling you, as far as the technique and the advancement in guitar playing surrounding 80s metal guitar players, hair bands, whatever you want to call them, was pretty astounding. Of where it started at the beginning of the decade and where it ended up was absolutely amazing. It was something to see. It was something to be a part of. I was thankful that I cut my teeth, if you will, during the 80s. It was fantastic. So George Lynch, very interesting individual, smart individual, strong personality, if you've ever watched any interviews with him. But it's kind of interesting as I've been researching him a little bit lately for this. And I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, already know this, that he really had a jazz background and foundation. And that's kind of what he liked to listen to. I think he was a big fan of Jeff Beck as well, which may not fit in the jazz category, but it fits in the how the heck can you play that category, because Jeff Beck is amazing. One of the few guys that have actually see him play guitar and you can see what he is doing, but you still don't know what he is doing. He's just really something special. But anyway, this is about George Lynch, not Jeff Beck. So George Lynch has this jazz foundation, but he even said that, you know, just the energy and the excitement of rock and roll largely had an appeal to him. What was interesting is, if you're back from that era and you remember that era, there was a comparison of George Lynch to Randy Rhoads. I don't know if that was founded or unfounded. Maybe it was because he kind of looked like him a little bit. Hair maybe was a little similar. And there was this dream scenario that was rumored about maybe Lynch playing with Ozzy, which would have been cool, but probably would have been really nice. But I think whoever Ozzy chose and what direction he went worked out pretty well for him. But what was interesting with Lynch, you saw him on the first album, Breaking the Chains. They may have had an EP before that. I don't really know. Feel free to chime in. But his playing was nice. His tone was really nice. It was kind of a Rhodes-esque tone. It had a little bit of that distance miking type of a sound and a little bit of a phase on it. It seemed like it was akin to Rhodes anyway. That was kind of the umbrella that came with him, it seemed like. But anyway, his note selection was very nice. Great vibrato is the thing about George Lynch. He didn't have to play a lot of notes because he had such a singing vibrato, which is really nice. Again, I know I've said it, you can play 1,000 notes a minute, but if you don't have any vibrato or bad vibrato, crappy vibrato, quick vibrato, I just can't hardly stand to listen to it. But so then, when he comes up to the second album, Tooth and Nail, you could see where he had progressed a little bit notier, I think. A lot more notes on some songs than what he had done previously, although Paris is Burning, the live track, or so-called live track on the first album, he did that long, great arpeggio thing. You probably remember it as... Let's try He'd do a lot of stuff kind of like this, like that, you know, the Eddie Van Halen. It's pretty effective. And it was amazing to watch Lynch because with so many other contemporaries that had Jakey Lee, Warren DeMartini, Vivian Campbell, up-and-coming Yngwie Malmsteen, even Eddie Van Halen, you could see his influences. You could see his influences were Randy Rhoads with that diminished stuff that he would do. A lot of Eddie Van Halen influence, whether he was a direct listener or not, with the tapping. You know, he was always tapping, and he was doing that finger slide thing too. Which is just classic Eddie Van Halen. So you could see those influences. I think one of the greatest things that I enjoyed about Lynch, one of the biggest things I enjoyed about Lynch, was how you could just sit back and album after album after album, you could just see him getting better. Where we talked about, you know, Vivian last time, he actually seemed to get worse, which is sad. But George Lynch was getting better. And then you could see that, you know, when Yngwie came out on the scene, that he had an influence on him. And even watched an interview with Lynch recently. He acknowledged the fact that Yngwie Malmsteen had an impact on him, and he wanted to learn that style. He wanted to learn those licks because it was so fascinating and fast. But what was great about Lynch, by the time that third and fourth album rolled around, and you could hear that influence of Yngwie in his playing, but he made it his own. It wasn't just note for note ripping off Yngwie like, say, Chris Pelletieri, a fine guitar player in his own right. Some things he does are amazing, but I mean, you know, that first album came out, it was just like, my God, he was just shameless in ripping off Yngwie. Whereas Lynch made it his own and does that bouncy, floaty, airy, whatever, you know, just made it his own. It was absolutely, totally entertaining. Loved those second, third, fourth albums. I just thought they were fantastic. His playing was off of the charts. You know, and then he went with Lynch Mob, bought a Lynch Mob CD many years ago. It was okay. I saw him play on Access TV at some big metal festival up in Maryland or Pennsylvania or somewhere. Loudness was there. Akira Takasaki was kicking some major butt. He was killer. And I believe they had Hell Yeah. They had a version of Skid Row. And Lynch Mob came out and played. And Lynch had like a powder blue Telecaster. And this is what I noticed about Lynch live, and even in some of his latter work, it just began to be buried in delay. He would just absolutely bury his tone, his sound in delay. I found that performance almost unlistenable. It was so bad. And I've watched some stuff of him playing live, and he does seem to rely a lot on delay. In the studio, he is absolutely fantastic, but he is a fantastic player. In particular, I've stumbled upon, as I'm sure you all know, the KXM stuff, the guy from King's X, the guy from Korn, and Lynch. It's a trio, and Voices in the Sky, I believe, is that one song. Just absolute arena rock, massive tone, great sound, great touch, great song, great singer. And if you haven't listened to any of that, I would encourage you to listen to some George Lynch with KXM. So anyway, I don't really have a lot to say about Lynch because I could never really cop his style that well. He was definitely an influence on my playing. Probably a lot of the, you know, him and Warren DeMartini almost sounded interchangeable at points, but, you know, he definitely had the artificial harmonic thing going on in the context of, let's just put in a blues riff, you know, it's like... always killing it. Loved it. He was one of my favorite players. He's an interesting individual to watch play because it seems like it's so physically demanding where he almost contorts when he plays. I saw him warm up, as we know, Ronnie James Dio Last in Line tour. That was tooth and nail for Dawkin. And he put on one heck of a show that night, and he sounded great. And me and a buddy of mine that went, we were like, man, Dio's going to have to be pretty good to top that. But I'll tell you what, old Ronnie came out in boys, and Jimmy Bain, Vinny Appice, and Vivian just tore it up. But I think one thing that I loved about Lynch, in summary, he did not rest on his laurels. And he continued. You could tell back in that era. I remember when he had his first cover story on Guitar Player magazine. And you could just tell by the interview, you could tell by listening to him, and I'm sure that he partied a lot or whatever, but man, that guy had to have been back in his room just practicing and listening to some other players that were influencing him, because he just kept getting so much better with every album and advancing just to become what I thought was, where he was an exciting player in his early years, I thought he became an elite player shortly thereafter because of his commitment to the craft. And that means a whole heck of a lot to me. So we might splice in a little bit of improv here. It's a little bit more of a positive, happy backing track, a little bit more of a Joe Satriani type backing track. And maybe we'll have a lick or two in there that sounds something like George Lynch. Maybe not, because I can't cop his style very well. He's a great player. Hope you enjoy. Please like and subscribe. Have a good one.